All right, that is Prime Minister Mark Carney in Quebec City, delivering an address to Canadians as his office builded. A number of his cabinet ministers surrounding him there. They will remain in Quebec City through to the end of tomorrow. They are huddled there for a cabinet retreat ahead of the return of the House of Commons on Monday. The Prime Minister drew some links with the speech that he delivered in Davos, Switzerland a few days ago to the World Economic Forum, essentially aiming to connect the national or more domestic situation with the world as we live in it, the way in which he characterized it during that speech in Davos, and hit on some policies that he has pursued or his government has pursued since they came into office, and then promised to redouble those efforts going ahead. I am joined now by Scott Reed, Lisa Raitt, and Kathleen Monk, who were with us in the lead up to the delivery of that speech and who listened in to the speech in its entirety and are here for their takes on the other end of it. Scott, I'll start with you. We had thought maybe there would be something specific announced in this or to drive the agenda heading into the return of the House of Commons. There was no policy announcement. It was mostly a recap alongside a history lesson, a recap of what they've done so far and some promises to keep doing it. What stood out to you?
Well, as you say, I mean, we expected a speech about national priorities. We got a speech about national identity, about the idea of Canada. I suppose what stood out to me, because it was largely a standard political speech, a recap of agenda items that they pursued, wrapped in a sort of focus on the historic nature of Canada and its nature, steeped there in the history of Quebec City. I guess the one section that stood out, perhaps if there's anything that really was an echo of Davos, it was fairly early in the speech and then very much echoed at the very end, when the Prime Minister said, look, you know, we used to take it for granted that these values could go forward undefended. Now we are going to have to fight for these values. And I think he was really there alluding to the fact that we no longer have a cooperative, reliable ally in the United States. And again, at the end of the speech, when he said, we're here because of us. We're not here because of the United States, and we're remarkable because of Canada, not because of America. But to be honest with you, this did not ring out with news in the way that Davos did or the way that we expected.
Yeah, that last line, I think, was added because I don't see it in the original copy of the speech, Lisa. Yeah, the one around, like, we don't live because of the United States. We had talked in anticipation of the speech about whether or not he would address that comment from the president of the U.S., which was made in response to the Davos speech. That was the only real reference in there to it. And like I said, I'm pretty sure it was added later on because it's not in the original copy of the speech. Lisa, what do you make of the speech? What do you think it did or didn't do?
It's not really clippable. I think he should have left Davos stand. It probably would have been a little bit better for him. I understand that you have to make these domestic speeches. I was looking for, like you said, a policy announcement or something bigger going forward. I get what their next slogan is going to be. We choose Canada. I think that's a very good election slogan if that's the direction that they're going in. I think the merch will be rocking. I can't wait to see that. And it was a very long speech, which is going to have to rely upon clipping and pushing out into social media and getting covered by folks like yourself. And I don't know if there's any rallying moments of clippability in there. Then I know people are going to say, boy, you're really cynical, Lisa, but that's the game, right? That's what we're talking about in terms of politics. And that's what happens when you have a speech that is just a very political speech, as Scott pointed out. It's something that would be given going into a stump or speech from the throne, maybe.
So why do you think the Prime Minister decided to deliver, Kathleen, that kind of speech now, a couple of days out from the return of the House of Commons?
I agree with Lisa that I would have let the Switzerland speech stand. I would have let that breathe because it's getting headlines around the world. This was more of a history lesson than it was really a newsmaker. I think the only line, and I was scanning my printout too of the speech to try to find if that was a last minute insert or if it was written in. It was definitely a last minute insert. So that was the only direct response towards the last, 45 seconds of the speech where he said, you know, Canadians don't live because of the U.S. We live because of ourselves. I mean, I'm paraphrasing wildly here, but that was the direct reference to when Trump in Switzerland yesterday basically said that that Canadians only exist because of the U.S. So that was, you know, a direct pushback on Trump's statements without mentioning him directly or referencing his speech. But the rest of the speech, you know, was largely, you know, kind of a history lesson, outlining their agenda of what they're going to do, checked a few boxes, talked about labor, talked about building, talked about big projects, but didn't really set out a new agenda. So I think he would have been stronger in letting the Davos speech stand and then just doing a wrap-up post-cabinet. But we'll see. You know, there'll be lots of news out of cabinet. We're going to see all of the cabinet ministers' scrums over the next few days. And we're going into a weekend where we'll have the Liberal caucus is also meeting in Ottawa. And so there's going to be lots of news. But whether this speech was necessary or was really going to rattle Canadians in the same way that we've seen the Davos speech change people's minds and really open up to Carney, I don't think this was it.
Well, I'm glad it happened because I got to see all of you. So thank you for lending us so much of your time and your analysis today. I appreciate it very much. Scott Reed, Lisa Raitt, and Kathleen Monk.